Hey everybody, welcome back to another reasonable price prediction, the series where we try to figure out where your favorite altcoins could be headed. Now today we're back with Litecoin. Now there are a few things that I want to look at in this video with Litecoin, but it's mainly going to be what has happened these last few weeks and how they've compared to prior cycles. And the first thing you'll probably the first thing you'll notice is these big sort of trends that I've drawn. Here in the orange is sort of our mini bull run that we get roughly 2 years after the main big bull run. And then this white line shows the slow accumulation phase that we get after the end of this bull run. Once we've had our correction and we've come back down to lows, we have a slow, steady upward movement with Litecoin. And we've not just seen this the last cycle, we saw it the first cycle Litecoin had, and we're also currently going through that now. We're currently experiencing it as this slow accumulation often takes place over the halving. And the first thing I want to draw your attention to is recently, last few weeks, leading up to the halving, Litecoin had a rally and broke this trend that had been set and that it had been following for a few months, multiple months. And while at first glance this might be a negative thing because obviously we've broken our trend, if we actually zoom back and take a look at previous cycles, we can see that Litecoin does actually almost always break out of this trend once to only then return to it and have other rallies afterwards that bring us to the highs and the lows of this trend to set the trend basically. And even if we go back to the first one, we can see pretty early on that we did have these kind of breakouts. And it was often pretty early on from where the trend started. I mean, we can see here this is a 2 months and we break above. If we go to the second one, we can say even less, a few weeks and we break above, a month and we break above. And now what's happened, if we go over here, we can see that we've actually taken a long time to finally break above. So it's the first cycle that Litecoin has experienced where we haven't broken up in the first few weeks. And now this can go either two ways, in my opinion, from what we've seen from past performance. It can either be that we have this breakup and therefore we know we're going to spend quite a few months afterwards until we get this second move up and then go into our bull run. Or this is the sort of fake out that we get right before our bull run. So for example, you can see I've actually set this up in a way that indicates that quite well from sort of the previous highs to the current high. Last cycle, Litecoin made a move of 40% upwards. And if we take a look at what happened here, it's literally the exact same. Litecoin made a move from the previous highs up 40% to its new high. And that's what this blue circle indicates. However, this isn't the theory that I think is correct personally. Now, I could be wrong, and we could very well see Litecoin begin a strong bull move to the upside very soon. It could be a few weeks later, it could be however long this was after the bull run, so it could be sort of a range of 4 months to a month, if you get me. If it's going to play out a similar way, and if it's following this pattern. But what I actually think is more realistic is actually moving this blue guy over here and kind of saying that this first initial breakout where we break the trend is equivalent to this guy. And just because it's happened longer, or it's taken longer to happen for us to break out of this trend of this cycle, it's still kind of consistent with how it's historically done it. All last cycles, it was before the halving that we had a big breakout. And we can see last time actually, it was basically at the halving where we had the breakout. We can see here that Litecoin had a breakout 3 weeks before the halving. And now if we zoom back to where we are now, Litecoin had this breakout basically 3 weeks before the halving. So first of all, very similar to this case. Now what did we see after that? So we have our strong breakout, Litecoin crosses the halving, and then we get a smaller rally up that's contained, we touch the resistance of the trend that we've set. And now note that this so far has always been a lower high than our blue circle, than our first initial trend breaker, always. And if we go back to this guy as well, and we take this as our trend breaker, we break above the trend before the halving. After the halving, a few weeks later, we break above to the upside and we sort of have wicks above, but on the weekly, we open and close below this resistance, but we touch it. And again, what happened here, we break above, come back down, stay within our trend over the halving, and then we get another rally up where we touch the top, come back down to touch the bottom, and then we're into our bull run. So actually, looking at it this way, this cycle is not actually the abnormality. It's the previous cycle that's slightly abnormal because of how long before we broke above compared to the other two cycles, where this cycle and the first cycle, Litecoin had a rally and collapsed down basically over the halving month. This last cycle, the cycle just gone, it came much earlier on. So now we're actually looking a lot more similar to what we saw the first cycle with Litecoin. And if that is the case, if we do want to assume that, because we also have a long time beforehand that we do nothing and then rally up for. This first cycle, we see that as well. We have a long time where we do nothing and then eventually we rally up and then come back down. If we want to assume that it's a similar case, Litecoin, after the halving, gets its rally up about 24 weeks afterwards. And then once it's had its rally up, we go into our bull run about 38 weeks afterwards. Now, from the halving, if we move 24 weeks, we can say that that would bring us to end of September, basically beginning of October, which is interesting. And I don't think it will actually play out. I think it will happen sooner if it's going to happen this way. And then if we go 38 weeks out, like we saw when the bull run began, we can see that that would bring us to January, beginning of January. Now, this could coincide with the type of Santa rally type of thing, New Year rally, lots of new money flooding into the market. But if we take a look at historically what season or what time Litecoin has kind of entered into a bull run, we can see the last cycle, it was end of October. So we'll say start of November time to be generous. And then if we go back to 2017, we can see that Litecoin actually rallied back in March. That's when it started its strong move. So we can see that, a couple of discrepancies here, but from November to March, there's about a 4-month window there. Now, if we kind of take these smaller rallies, we can see that they happened or started towards the end of the year. Again, if we go back to kind of this type of a rally here, this orange one, we get November when things start to move from this low to the high. That's when it really starts. You could argue here, which is back in June, but ultimately we just traded sideways until that point. That's when we went up. So the medium here seems to be December, January. We get December, we get March, we get November, we get November again, and then where this next one is predicted, it's January. So it does line up in terms of seasonality, where things could happen. Now, no way is this a guarantee. Of course, Litecoin can go either way whenever it wants, but if you are going to try put a pattern on it, this is one that is founded within reason. Another interesting thing that I wanted to point out, if you don't want to subscribe to that belief and you think that we're most likely, this blue here is equivalent to this guy, like we talked about before, the time frame that you have from sort of the low that this range starts from to the high where it breaks above took 36 weeks. If we take the low that this range started from, and well, you could argue this is the high that we broke above here, but we've now come back down below, so really we haven't moved up from this range. So if you want to kind of take 36 weeks, it's basically this week that we have to break above if we're going to see a similar thing play out. Now, it does look like Litecoin could have a reversal here, potentially. Now, most likely, I think we'll touch this range low before we make any strong move. So realistically, you're probably going to be another 3-4 weeks before you see any kind of strong move up. But there is a case to be made there that we are now near crunch time compared to the last cycle where we sort of shot up. Now, one last thing I will talk about, just quickly to demonstrate potential gains that you could make from the halving. If we take where Litecoin crossed last cycle, Litecoin went up 850%, and this sort of arrow here indicates the highs of roughly 800%. Now, if you think Litecoin, and I don't think it will, but if you think Litecoin will go up 815% from the current halving, that would give you roughly a $750 Litecoin, give or take. With the previous high of Litecoin, just to keep in mind, $400. So it would be almost a 2x from the previous high. Now, this is a lot. And to be honest with you, with the Litecoin's track record, where it keeps returning to this just under 400 level, I wouldn't hold out for that. And especially as kind of nothing new has really happened with Litecoin. It just continues to be the test net, basically, for Bitcoin. What I do think, to be honest with you, is more realistic is maybe we do go slightly higher. Like we can see the previous cycle, we went slightly higher than the cycle before that in terms of high. And that was kind of a $50 plus move, which is still, more money is more money. I'm not going to scoff at making more gains, but maybe you should consider more of a movement like this than an 800% move from the halving like we saw last time. Again, if I was holding Litecoin, I would be kind of selling at this $300 range, because you can see you don't spend much time above or even in that range, and it's a very strong resistance, and there's a chance that you might not even get into it. You can see here that it tried last time and technically it wicked just into the 300 range, but basically didn't. So again, you'd probably be smarter to actually put your sell order at 280, something like that. But anyway, that's enough about Litecoin on the US dollar chart. Let's look at the Bitcoin Litecoin pair. Now, zooming out, it's a pretty grim picture, to be honest with you. And zooming into what we're currently seeing, it's just as grim, really. Litecoin has now put in a new all-time low on the Bitcoin pair. And while Litecoin does have similarities over the cycles from halving to halving, the main thing that we notice is that Litecoin trends down. Now, it does have these great spikes at times, and again, that's when we get alt seasons and Litecoin rallies up. For example, Litecoin rallies up 6x against Bitcoin, but we haven't really seen that in a long time. And in fact, the last rally that we kind of got wasn't too long ago, back in June of 2022, but that was basically a 2x against Bitcoin. Now, that's, a 2x is good, but considering it was an altcoin and it didn't really do much over the Bullrun year, it's kind of depressing for that to be a pro, that it didn't suffer as badly as Bitcoin did during a short period of time, which it then lost all of its progress from and went even lower. And again, looking at this chart, you can see like on average the highs drop about 50%. Last cycle they dropped 70% from the cycle before that, and I've taken an average here and put 60, but it could very well be more. Who really knows? It's the same with the lows, where the lows just keep dropping 50% into the second cycle, 60% into the third, and again I took an average 55% into the fourth. This really does just show you how bleak Litecoin is. Again, it kind of shows you the drops from the peak from the previous cycle to the low at the next cycle, and on average it is basically 93%, and that's on the Bitcoin pair, which kind of, you shudder to think what it will be on the kind of USD pair. Another thing to look at is that leading up to the halving and after the halving, Litecoin always, so far, has traded down on the Bitcoin pair. And that's for roughly an equal amount of time leading up to the halving and after the halving, following the halving. So you kind of see, if you spend 6 months going down into the halving, you spend 5 or 6 months going down after the halving. And we've seen this the last 2 halvings. I would argue we're currently seeing it play out now as well into the current halving. Litecoin started going down in July of 2023 and has basically been going down up until now, which is late April. So very close to a year. And now maybe we won't see it trade down for a year, maybe we'll see it trade down for 6 months after this. It could be a bit strange where it's not an equal amount of time before and after. Ultimately, it doesn't really matter. It just shows that Litecoin is on a downward trend and will most likely continue to follow that downward trend for the foreseeable future, as in 6 months, possibly longer, possibly less. I don't have a crystal ball, but all I can tell you is that's what it's done every single time before. And Litecoin is one of the few cryptocurrencies that we have a lot of data for. We have basically back until 2013. So to have a coin this old and to have patterns that have played out this clearly, you'd want to take advantage of that and hopefully not be blinded by a passion for the coin or by previous performance. But again, I'm not here to try and change your mind. I'm just here to put these charts in front of you and hopefully you think about them, and maybe that results in a change of mind. It doesn't affect me, to be honest with you. I just want to make sure people have all the information that they have, and I don't think a second opinion ever really hurts. So yeah, that's my kind of sob story for Litecoin. Realistically, I don't have much hope in the coin. That's fine. You don't have to agree with me. You can disagree with me. Tell me down in the comments why you disagree with me. But that is what I think. And that's why I think it's much better to hold Bitcoin over Litecoin, especially if you're a long-term player. That's kind of exactly what has happened. Litecoin has just bled to Bitcoin. And you can see very clearly, cycle after cycle after cycle, Litecoin just doesn't stand the test of time. Not against Bitcoin, not against other altcoins really either. But again, I could be wrong. This could be where Litecoin changes. It could see a huge reversal here, go to all-time highs on its Bitcoin pair. I have no clue. And if it does, then, hey, I'll be damned. But until then, thanks very much for watching, guys. If you liked the video, leave a like. If you didn't, leave a dislike. Comment down below where you think Litecoin is headed. Thanks very much, guys. Take care and peace.